Hi.
Hello,
Hey, Ryan.
how are you?
Good, good. Finally, we
Awesome.
meet.
I know, it's a pleasure. I was talking to my friend Chris, who I think you interviewed not too long
Yeah,
ago.
that's
Great
right.
guy.
Yeah, it's gonna go out today. I finished editing that video, and that's actually how we met
Oh,
via
sweet.
via our mutual friend, Chris.
Very true. He's
Yeah.
a great guy. I've known him for a long time. We talk like literally every day. We're like talking about something.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I met him via social media, and we have our shared, carnivorous journeys,
Mhm.
and I thought it was interesting, to share his transformation journey, my transformation journey, and then I came across your journey, which I think is equally interesting. So I think we can talk about that a little bit and kind of like talk about how carnivore has been such an instrumental tool in so many people's lives, and in your case and specifically it helped you with your eating disorder, I believe, anorexia.
Correct. Yeah, no, I found more and more often. So, there's so many similarities with people that have eating disorders. I think like everyone's super serendipitous. And even people that don't have an eating disorder per se, but a manifestation of some sort of mental health issue, whether it's anxiety or depression or even bipolar, all of these various things. I just see so many similarities in how people got to where they are. And I've been through the medical system both for physical and mental health due to the same problem, really.
Mhm.
Physical problems due to anorexic tendencies and vice versa. And I've just found like this huge group of people finding healing using animal based or low carb, high fat or carnivore diets. And I myself found it really fascinating. So I kind of gave it a try myself. And I just found this level of calming that I've never experienced doing all the right things to better my health. And so
Right.
I just wanted to sort of spread that message and also just investigate it further by working with people who are they themselves struggling with the same problems, you know?
Right. So how long have you been doing, and actually before, I guess we should say that you're a certified health coach, right? And you specialize in carnivore primal diets, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, what was the question?
No, I just said that before we continue. I
Okay.
wanted to ask you about I wanted to ask you how long you've been doing carnivore, but before that, I think it's important that people know that you're certified in this. And yeah, anything else you would like to add with regards to what you do before we share, how long you've been doing carnivore, etc.
Yeah, so currently right now I'm actually helping. So I do social media full time with a good friend of mine, and we are working on kind of exploring a more ketogenic lifestyle for my friend has stage 4 terminal cancer. And so we're starting a cancer channel that's all focused on sort of the
Mhm.
alt med focus of cancer therapy, primarily through metabolic therapy. So a lot of like ketogenic lifestyles, and even animal based. So we're kind of exploring that as well, just because I think so much of our bodies are connected to the same problems. They just manifest different comorbidities, if that's the right word.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of exploring all these things. But yeah, those are kind of the main things, is just the health coaching and sort of just I like being, I think a lot of people don't have the support system when they're going through a lot of eating disorders, even if they're working with a nutritionist or a therapist. It's through the insurance system, it's really crap. It's really bad. And I think having someone that has been there themselves is really important to that journey. So I want to be that for somebody else because I wish I had that going through things.
That's such a great point because you see such a huge discrepancy between the theory and then the practicality. When you actually practice the things that you thought theoretically should work, all of a sudden so many things fall apart and you realize that it just doesn't make sense. And that's when you go on that journey to try and come up with the real answer. And it might be different answers for different people, but
Definitely.
in your case specifically, a carnivore diet was a huge tool, correct?
Oh, it was pretty instrumental. And I'm someone that kind of goes in and out. I found that if I go sort of like, I have sort of a seasonal approach to the way I eat. I don't like to conform to a certain ideology, only because I found with I have a history of OCD, so obsessive compulsive disorder, and certain things where I find, and I see this with a lot of people that have eating disorders, is they latch onto one thing, they think it's, and I see this in the community, maybe they don't have a disorder at all, but I just see they latch on to things as, this is the answer. And then 6 months later, like, oh, that didn't work. Now this is the answer. And really, I think what everyone should be doing is not looking for a singular thing, but looking at, okay, here are 6 different people that I like. What can I take from each of these people or ideologies of thought and apply them to myself? I think there's not enough thinking of what works for me in my current situation that goes on. It's always like, and that's just marketing, which I understand as
Yeah.
working in social media. But I like to try and be that, okay, let's look at these 6 things and what are one of each thing you can take away from that. And I think carnivore is something that everyone can benefit from personally. I think it's ancestrally consistent. I think it's I mean, meat and fat just frankly are the most important things your body needs. Like no matter what, like I'm never going to like talk to somebody and be like, yeah, you need to eat more spinach. Like that's it. That's the missing link here, is all these green. I don't think it's necessary, but I do think everyone needs meat and fat. We can talk about amounts and all these different things, but that's what I found so interesting about all this stuff with carnivore is that it's the one thing to where it may not be the full answer for your issues. It certainly wasn't for me, but it was a huge portion of it. I mean, I think frankly, we just have, I mean, I see it. My mom's a school teacher. She teaches first grade. She's never seen in her 40 years of teaching the amount of students being diagnosed and coming with anxiety,
Right.
depression, all these like mental health issues.
ADHD.
ADHD is a huge one.
Yeah.
And I can't help but think it's the way that we just live our lives and are starting to live our lives differently at a younger and younger age. We put kids on screens, all these problems. And so while carnivore is, I think, a major help in sort of like lowering the overall brain inflammation or inflammation that's going on, I think there are other steps to that. But I think it's integral to do something with that. And I just think animal-based is the way with all that stuff.
100%. How long or around what year did you come across this notion? And, maybe if you can take us back a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think for me, my journey I really suffered from anorexia really badly about 7 years ago when I was a senior in high school, graduating into college. That's kind of where I had just a mental break. There was a lot of trauma that I never dealt with from like earlier on in life. And then I just had one extra trauma that kind of broke the camel's back. And I went down this path of actually wanting to be fitter and bettering myself, but it just led into a spiral of chaos. And so even coming out of that and getting back to a stable weight zone, which is basically was the last step that the medical community will look at you, is once you start looking okay, they're like, all right, you're fixed. And I even get asked this when I go just for doctor's appointments. They're like, oh, so but you're past the disordered stuff, right? That's it was like I was like, well, it's more complicated than that, but I'm not going to waste my time here in your 5 minutes that you're going to give me to talk about this stuff. But for me, my actual journey looking at all these different dietary paradigms and the environmental stuff around us, like the screens and everything, was about 2 years ago when I started developing problems associated with my anorexic tendencies. I started getting neuropathy. I discovered I had a bunch of hormonal dysregulation that was never fixed because no one ever bothered to tell me to check it. So I had crashed testosterone. My thyroid was all a mess, super hypothyroid. My bone density is still crap, which I'm like working on now. But all of these things that I knew could be problems, but were never brought to my attention because once I physically looked better, no one thought that, hey, you have all these ramifications that run off of this. And I still mentally was not in a super great place. And so after I started having all these physical manifestations, which is that kind of the last domino, I started looking at all these different things that could be. I started looking at the way I was eating. I experimented. I never went plant-based, or well, I shouldn't say this. I did go plant-based, I guess. I never went like fully vegan or removing meat, but I did definitely like, because that's the mainstream. I feel like everyone that starts looking into bettering stuff, plant-based is just such a huge push thing in the mainstream that's where everyone goes to first, because that's just what is there on Google or there in the functional med community. And so got really into that, probably developed a bunch of other problems with anti-nutrients, just slamming green.
Oxalates,
Oh,
yeah.
lots. I definitely have oxalate issues. I've definitely been through the dump, and I'll go through it every couple months. I'll have like a week or two where I'm just like, oh man, it's dumping right now.
Right.
But that's kind of what led me on this journey. And about a year ago is when I started saying, hey, okay, these plants not helping me at all. And I found Sean Baker, who I think everyone will reference in their journey. I found actually I found a dear friend of mine who overcame an autoimmune disease using carnivore, and he had been pushing me to do it for several months, but I just never connected dots in my head.
What was the autoimmune issue that was?
He had chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy, so CIDP.
Wow.
Really crippling, had it his whole life, 30 years, and then found carnivore, and the dude is you would never know. Like, the dude is lifting weights, he's
So
active.
basically remyelination occurred.
Exactly.
Wow.
Really insane. And I mean, I've worked with doctors like Dr. Terry Walls, who has MS, and she led me down the path of incorporating things like organ meats and thinking about nutrient density.
Yeah.
But there's more to that story that led me to MS. I found people like Paul Saladino, just started listening to podcasts and then experimenting with myself. And I feel like for me, because I had some neurological problems, I think having cholesterol and fat and all the hormonal problems is just super integral. And I think for anyone that has any sort of signs of brain inflammation, which is anyone with anxiety, eating disorders, OCD, that you need things that are only going to be found in animal products to balance any inconsistencies in brain chemicals, like choline. Like, you need choline for brain function. You're only going to get that in eggs, meat, liver, like all these things.
Exactly. And if you attempt to get the choline from plant sources like broccoli or soybean oil, the sheer amount of those foods that you would need to eat, yeah, you'd get the choline, but then you'd get the hypothyroidism symptoms from all the goitrogens and, you know, all the toxins found in plant foods. So it's very, very difficult to optimize on a plant-based, let alone vegan diet.
I think the story really is simplification, and if you remove all the noise, just think logically what you have. Or I like to do this with clients or just people I talk to. I say, I live in Utah. It's very deserty. It's very snowy. I like to think about what could I find in my environment that I would focus on thriving on if I was in like Naked and Afraid, the TV show. And those people, if you ever see the survivalists, they always immediately focus on protein and fat. Like, they're not looking for cabbage in the wild. They're not looking for, like, they will eat like fast carbs if they have fruit, if they're in tropical environments. But at the end of the day, they're focused on fat and meat because they need that to get through and survive and thrive. And so I've just started thinking about it on a real basic level. And if you remove all the noise, like, you'll know what you need to eat. It's really simple. And that's what I love. I think what I love about this way of eating more than anything is just its simplicity. It makes sense. But I think at the same time, we've grown to expect so much complexity from life and our busy lives, that simplicity really messes with our brain. Like, we can't grasp simplicity. But yeah, I think everyone has to get to that point.
I agree. And I would add also all of these food companies with all of their different foods, that every few months there's a new spin, some new claim that they're adding. And that confuses people because those are the food companies that have all the money, all of the influence and the money to put behind the messaging that you need this food, or like, so there's not enough power behind the functional medicine or the carnivore way of eating, because we're like, where do you make money? Just like eat meat. There's not, those doctors aren't multimillionaires. They don't have the same influence that so many other food companies on the other hand do. So it's like the deck is stacked against one being able to get healthy. And so this is what confuses people so much. It's like, what do you mean I can't eat this and that? So are you telling me that I cannot eat 99.99% of what I've been eating all my life? I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm telling you. If you want to optimize.
Yeah, it's very true. And I think, well, I mean, we've grown to enjoy certain comforts and certain like beliefs that are just so far from necessary. I mean, my whole journey, like especially the last 6 months, has been, how can I simplify my life, as opposed to, I feel like we grow up, we go to school, and then we do all these things to work to death, and then retire for 10 years and then pass away, hopefully in our sleep. And I think it's just such a backwards, I mean, it's a backwards way of just looking at life. I just feel like we just got to simplify things for people. And it takes time. Everyone's at a different starting point. I mean, I didn't get to carnivore overnight. It took me a while to even consider it. But also, I mean, I think there are more facets to carnivore than just the food. It's really, I want to instill to people that it's a lifestyle. It's a way of looking at the world. It's a way of looking at just your life in general, and simplifying and focusing on what is important and removing noise. I mean, it's really about removing noise.
So true. And then when you see that and you experience the benefits yourself, and you're like, so what a powerful dietary treatment, if you want to call it that. But yet here are all of those major organizations, from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, the American Heart Association, everybody, how can they recommend something so completely opposed to our most basic ancestral diet? And I think that puts a lot of people on a journey to start questioning everything, and that the authority figures that we grew up respecting, all of a sudden, you develop confidence in yourself, and at the same time you realize how far these things go and how things really aren't the way they seem. And there's no lazy way around it. You have to do your own research. Don't expect anybody to have your best interests at heart.
Yeah, and I've always been someone that's been like very much for personal patient advocacy, like being your own, because I've seen the experts in neurology fields all the way, like in like hospitals like Boston, Massachusetts, Brigham and Women's in Boston. And I sat there in an appointment, having spent thousands of dollars to get there and waiting months and months to like see someone. Not only did I see the wrong doctor that didn't specialize in my own like neurological issue, but I sat there thinking, I know as much as you. And why did I waste all this time to get here expecting different? And I think that the problem is we go to different doctors. We see so many specialists. We see the psychiatrists over and over again, get new medications to help with other medications that don't work. And it's not to say that medications are like evil. I think there's a place for like medication in certain spots, but I think we rely on everything too much on medication. It's not the answer. I like to look at everything as a tool to get you where you need to be, and hopefully off those things. Because I'll tell you what, when I was having panic attack, I was on Klonopin for a while, which is a benzodiazepine. I was on Lexapro for years, which didn't do anything, just wasted money. And like all sorts of benzos all the time. And the best thing I ever did was get off those and focus on the external factors and what I was putting in my body to actually nourish my depleted brain and stuff like that. I think people feel helpless And I just want people to know that you can get where you want to be, but no one's going to give it to you. Even in the community, like we can give you all the resources and what helped us in our journey, but you have to do it and figure out what's going to work for you. That's why I liked what you said when you said you have to be kind of your own sleuth there.
Yeah.
Because I mean, working with a coach, I would say for anyone that especially like is in the weeds and have a lot of complex things going on, do it. Like it'll be immensely helpful, but I can't force you as a coach to do anything. You have to actually implement what I
But
suggest.
you will shorten that learning curve dramatically.
100%, which is why I always tell people to work with someone or find somebody that's gone through it, like my friend that I said mentioned, and just have someone that be accountable with, and don't do it alone. Because unfortunately, though, a lot of people do have to do it alone, which is where like looking into things is extremely important, and some people just can't afford all stuff, which again is why I think Carnivore is great, because it can be affordable. I just think it's something anybody can do, which is what I love about it.
Agreed. And to go back to the point that you said about seeing the doctor and realizing that they don't know any better than you do. And that's so funny, because I tell my students every semester, because I teach at Miami-Dade College, right? Mm-hmm. And the 3-credit nutrition is a basic nutrition course. It's pretty much any degree you want to take in any university. This is like a basic course that is given to satisfy your science electives. So I get like around 100 students every semester. And I always tell them, by the end of the semester, you are going to know more about nutrition than your primary care physician, guaranteed. And it's true. And they all think that that's crazy, but it is true. I mean, I go and I show them the medical school programs. You are lucky if you can find a medical school program that gives you a 3-credit course. This is the course that I teach in one semester. They don't do that. They don't give nutrition. At best, they'll give you 1 chapter on nutrition that goes into the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, my plate, which is, the worst possible thing that you can put someone on.
Well, I took those exact courses when I was in college because I was interested in this stuff. And I was actually going through probably my worst anorexia at the time. I was probably 100 pounds when I graduated college. And so I'm actually surprised I graduated college with acceptable like grades and everything, because I was so depleted. Like I would fall asleep in the afternoon. By 5 p.m. I would be done. By 8, I'd be out in bed, and then I'd be up getting terrible sleep. I'd be up at 5:30 because I'm just riding this cortisol train to keep my body alive, and adrenaline. I'm just pushing out all these stress hormones to just stay functioning. But I took those very same courses, and looking back on them, they were valuable to get me in the door. But once I got in the door, I threw out all those books.
Oh, yeah. No, trust me. I mean, listen, did my bachelor's and my master's in nutrition with Ph.D. in exercise physiology. Not once was I ever given what I teach now. Yeah. It was all that, that's why I have a video on my YouTube channel that says that I regret getting my Ph.D. and it's true.
Yeah.
And the problem is that those are people that are theorists that are teaching. Very few, you would be very lucky to find a professor who actually is doing the thing that they're teaching about. They're just teaching, they're just going off theory. But yet the moment they stop doing that and they go actually practice it, everything they thought was right, all of a sudden, a lot of things fall apart.
And this is why I love talking to people like yourselves who are still educating students and are in the field actively and have discovered all these things, because we need more people like that. Yeah. Otherwise we're just churning out the same stuff year after year and graduating class after graduating class, and it's not furthering anything, and it's just contributing to the growing state of disease.
Yeah. And I'll tell you something about that, but off the record. I'll tell you something I think you would want to know about the academic world, and but I can't have that online yet, but eventually I'll say it.
Fair.
Yeah.
But no, I just it's just crazy. It's like you said earlier, where you begin to question everything, because everything is, and I don't mean to be a conspiracy theorist, but they are fun. But everything goes back to money. Like at some point, like everything you see on TV, all the science that puts out and is published in PubMed. Like, so I literally take everything, even all this stuff. I take it with a grain of salt. And that's why I say you really got to apply it to yourself and your situation, because you're never going to get a cookie cutter. And that's sadly what is the only thing that can really be sold or put through a standard of care in the medical system, because it just doesn't operate that way. And it's not the fault of, I mean, all the doctors I met really are lovely people. I think a lot of them are really trying to help their patients, and they're just not, they're set up to fail. And it's just and I honestly don't think that we'll ever fix it, because it's so big that it would take generations, and somehow the removal of money, which will never happen. So that's why I think like all we can do is educate as many people as possible through what you're doing on YouTube and your Instagram, because that's really the only way to push any of this forward, especially with the mental health stuff, because I know mental health is really big over the last 2 years. I just find the approach to it completely like false. Nothing's ever helped me especially with eating disorders. We hear about all foods fit. You got to fit all these foods from every category. Otherwise you still have an eating disorder. And it's like, well, most of these foods, like 80% of them didn't exist before 100 years ago. So how does that make sense? And why does that mean, like, I don't know, it just doesn't make any sense. So I'm kind of a contrary voice to the standard, which puts me in kind of a compromised position, because I get people messaging me telling me that I'm going to contribute to people's eating disorders. And so it's difficult.
That's a great point you just said. So my dissertation, I worked on the impact of a 20-minute high-intensity interval training exercise on addictive eating behaviors. So I had to do all the research on addiction and eating disorders and how all those things work. And through my research, it shows up that all of the eating disorders, whether it's binge eating disorder or anorexia or bulimia, orthorexia, whatever it is, they share the same mechanism with depression. Those are depressive states. Those are states of an inflamed brain, right? And so if the gluten you are eating is leading to inflammation of your brain that is being expressed as anorexia, then yes, you can't be having grains and you cannot be having gluten. It's not about just achieving balance, this word that so many food companies love so much, like practice balance, practice intuitive eating. Well, you can't do that with foods we have no business eating, with foods that are addictive, that are changing the chemistry of our brain.
100%. I totally agree. And it's just, I mean, I think that was the most mind-opening thought I've ever had shown to me, was thinking about food in that sense, and that there actually are right and wrong with certain things. And there are some universal truths we could talk about grains in like a entire separate thing, I'm sure. But even the way we consume grains here in the US is very different than, say, in Europe, or how grains are produced or fermented. Because I know a lot of people that have gluten intolerance here really, really badly, can't eat anything. And then they'll go to Europe and for some reason, bread doesn't bother them. And it's just, there's so many nuances to everything that it's super fascinating. But I think there are just some universal truths. When you have neuroinflammation, there are just certain things that you have to remove entirely to calm inflammation. It's just how it is. And I don't think there is a way around it. And when you're somebody that has some real psychiatric issues, like an eating disorder, you're someone that it's vital to do that. Otherwise you're just going to be stuck in this hamster wheel, per se.
Yeah. And it's so sad. There's so few people that are advocating what we're advocating, that are in functional medicine, but at the same time, that we're not all what most functional medicine doctors, unfortunately, are still recommending, just a plant-heavy diet. I don't know. I feel like the shift the tide has been shifting a little bit more towards carnivore and keto and carnivore, but I still find a lot of in the functional medicine world, there's still a lot of emphasis, or maybe an acceptance of a lot of plant foods still, you know. So there, and functional medicine is already in the minority, you know.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's because on some level, like, I mean, not to like put it all on, I think functional medicine is definitely like the step in the right direction, but it's still like its own business. Like, I think a lot of functional med doctors push too many supplements on people. I remember my first functional medicine meeting, I left with like spending $500 in supplements. I had like a cabinet full.
I used to have that too.
Yeah. It's, well, I think there are certain ones that like may be beneficial, like magnesium for a lot of people and stuff like that. But it's just, there's so many things you can just get from the most bioavailable nutrition from meat and animal foods. Like, I think right now too, because there's a lot of quote unsettled science with things like polyphenols and phytonutrients, and there's not the research and all and like gut health stuff. It's sort of in mainstream, it's still very new science. So when you go to alt med, it's easy to say like, oh, all these things, because they sound like really cool words, like phytonutrients, polyphenols. Like, that's a cool word. That's a great buzzword. Like, when I hear that, I'm like, that's great. I need some of those. I think we're overhyping some of the things that are sold when we either don't really know or they're just not that important. And by the way, you can get a lot of that in meat because the cow ate grass, which had polyphenols in it, or phytonutrients. And it's
well, your body creates antioxidants too.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. That's a really big one. I think people take way too much vitamin C. I see people like smashing it. I'm just like, endogenous oxalates, man. Like, you know, but yeah, it's just, I mean, it's an industry itself. And so that's like what I said, like, you gotta take everything with a grain, take what you can.
And it's also the way that humans' brains work, and scientists' brains are no different, right? The way that we see things is through the RAS, right? The reticular activating system. I feel like every self-help person guru out there knows about it and they talk about it. The RAS is that area in your brain that filters through all the information around you and only focuses on what you deem to be relevant. What that means is you already have to have something that you think is important and relevant so that your RAS in the brain picks up relevant information that surrounds this hypothesis you have, or that belief you already have. And so scientists are no different than the rest of humans, and they have to have already something that they believe in to write that hypothesis on that grant to be able to run that study. So they're already starting out with something that they've already decided to be true, and then they conduct a whole study to make it easier and easier for them to prove what they already think is true is true. So you already have a school of thought over decades that believes that those plant chemicals are antioxidants for humans. And so all the studies that are being run are hypothesizing that if you eat more of those, we should see healthier outcomes. And they're not realizing the inherent bias that they already have. But nobody has ever, well, I mean, there are, but they're in the minority, conducted studies with the hypothesis that those polyphenols, those antioxidants in the plants, those are antioxidants for the plant to defend itself. Doesn't mean it's going to transfer to us. Doesn't mean that benefit is going to transfer to us, right? And so very few doctors have hypothesized that, and thus that's why you see so few studies that aim to look at, well, what happens when we omit those polyphenols?
Yeah, there's a lot of inferences made, I think, just in general about things in medicine or with a lot of these, like a lot of these there's a lot of like you mentioned, hypotheses on like what's going to work in a human body. And I don't think there's a lot of like discussion around, I mean, there is within the community, but in general, there's not a lot of discussion around like, okay, this works in the plant, or this works in a vacuum of a single cell sort of situation. But how does it interact with all the thousands of chemical processes that go on in the human body? And it's so complex. And then it starts to kind of break down, I think, the arguments when you start, and that's the problem with a lot of like scientific studies in general is like a lot of studies are built around looking at a single parameter or a single function of something on something else. And they're not looking at the 10 other things that would be contributing to this thing as well. And that's just how studies are built. So that's just a flaw within how they build studies. And so that's why it's like, I'll watch lots of videos where they cite studies and I'm like, that's great, but it doesn't really mean that much, really. Like the best thing to do would be like, get a bunch of people doing one thing. Like, that's why I'm excited. I'm really excited to see if Sean Baker like does this carnivore diet study.
Yeah.
With
it's
like
an RCT, right? They're going to do a randomized controlled trial.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, yes. That would be something.
So that, I think that will be really, really cool. Cause I think that's what we need. There's so many studies that are just like within cell cultures that just don't, I just throw them out because they almost don't translate to anything because there's so many processes.
Yeah, it's easier to do that form of controlled environment, but yeah, we're talking about a biological organism, a living human being, and so it's difficult. That's the problem with nutrition. Nutrition is a very, very recent science. I mean, the first vitamin ever was discovered only in 1926. I think it was vitamin C. So it's a very recent science, and this is why you see so many crazy recommendations coming out from, you know, all the grains you should be eating to all those foods that they're saying, or to, you know, avoid the one food, which is red meat, that allowed us to evolve for over 2 million years.
That's so wild. I get in fights about it. it's like, and I feel bad because I try to be as understanding as I can be, because I think I avoided red meat for several years just because I was like, I have heart disease risk in my family. And I was like, I literally just ate chicken and like lean seafood for like 4 years. And that was like the worst health of my life, was doing that and there's so many problems with chicken now that it's like, it's actually really, really difficult to find quality poultry of almost any kind, because they're just fed the worst things. Even organically, they're just fed organic of the same stuff. It's like not great, organic grains or whatever. And so it's actually, they're like, red meat is like the best thing anybody could add. If there's like one thing I would say like to change about anything, just like eat more red meat.
Yeah.
You know?
Agreed, 100%. Neuropathy. So let's talk about that. Just share with us what you can about that journey.
Yeah, so that's actually the journey that started me down this entire path. Was I started developing neuropathic symptoms. It started as like tingling in my hand, and I figured it was just carpal tunnel because I work on the computer, like I edit videos. I'm on the computer like hours and hours a day. So I figured that's what it was. But within a month at the very least, it had spread to my entire body. And within 3 months, I pushed through the medical system, because I was just being told I had nothing wrong. And I just kept going back to the doctor. I was like, no, you're wrong, bro. I need you to test this. And I basically was doing all my own research. I was telling my doctors what to test every single time, even my neurologist, which frankly was like really shocking to me how, for lack of a better word, incompetent the guy was. And love the guy, great dude. I'm sure he's doing his best in whatever situation he's in. But I eventually got diagnosed with small fiber neuropathy, which you can't diagnose that through generic means. So like an EMG would be a test that someone would take to look at how your nerves are functioning, and or an NCS test to look at your neuromuscular connection. And you can't see that with small fiber neuropathy because it's purely sensory. So it's like within the teeniest nerves in your skin is what the issue is. And so that was the issue for me. And also why it was full body systemic was it was my body basically shorting out in words. So that's when I went to Boston and saw the leading experts in small fiber neuropathy, which, by the way, is becoming slowly the most common neuropathy to be diagnosed. 50%, I think it's 50% of people with fibromyalgia actually have small fiber neuropathy. That's the source of their pain. And it's just been, we just didn't know what to test. the only way to test for it is they take a skin biopsy and look at the nerves under a microscope, basically, and they just see they're frayed. And so for a lot of people with fibro, I would almost guarantee you have small fiber neuropathy. And if I was a woman, they probably would have just straight up diagnosed me with fibromyalgia without any testing and then stopped there. So there's a huge disparity just based on sex of what you'll be diagnosed with, which is super unfortunate. But unfortunately, I've also given up on trying to fix that system. And because I got really big into the chronic illness community, and I was like, we're not helping anybody by doing this still. So I had to start looking further. But so that's kind of where, I mean, I'm still working on it. I still have some like neuropathy symptoms. They've calmed down incredibly since I started doing a more animal-based approach with a lot of focus on myelination of the nerves. So a lot of like focus on cholesterol and saturated fats, which all your like nerves are lined with basically.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of that has calmed down. And I think there's a huge mental component that's tied into neuropathy, as in people with brain inflammation, I think are more likely to develop those things because our nervous system is just connected with all these, like it's all myelinated.
Right.
So any problem with myelin is potential to develop those issues. They're not separate problems. I try to get everyone to look at them as like everything is connected to the same things. I mean, people develop neuropathy from hormonal imbalances. So everything's connected. So that's why I think like Carnivore and in particular has been helpful, because it's a whole body approach. It's not just like, okay, let me focus on the nerves. No, I got to focus on rebalancing the hormones and just the cortisol levels, got to bring those down, and work on the testosterone. Like everything's connected. So that's been my biggest like kind of mind opener, is just how connected everything is. And so that's why I don't look at, I think a lot of people look at diagnoses as like, oh, I have this diagnosis and this diagnosis and this, but they're all the same problem. I think everything's connected. So that's why I'm actually against, in some sense, I think having a diagnosis is helpful, but I'm kind of against it being like the end all be all of treatment, because I could have been prescribed many things for the various problems I have, hormone replacement, gabapentin for nerve pain, all these things, but it's not addressing like the interconnectedness of that. And then that's something that diet and lifestyle does do, is it addresses all those problems.
Yeah. And that's why functional medicine was such a life changer for me. Once that seed, that thought that they planted, about everything is connected, it's not like your acne has absolutely nothing to do with your depression or your panic attacks or your inability to drop body fat. No, everything comes together. And a big thing also, I think, is leaky gut, that kind of connects everything, right? Because
I would say everyone with a mental health, like anything, has leaky. I mean, almost anybody that just lives in the Western world has leaky gut, like at some level. And some are just more than others. But that's why I think, you attest to this. That's why Carnivore is so powerful, because you actually allow your gut to heal. So,
True.
Yeah.
And even with that, you probably still, the moment you take a leave, you already have some level of leaky gut,
Oh yeah, I was popping that in aspirin all the time.
Yeah. There's plenty. I did a video on that, and linking like a study where it's very clear, like they literally get an NSAID and they show the leaky gut that results from that, on a single cell layer of an enterocyte, they show you what happens. So, and it's so crazy, the sheer amount of science that has been published on leaky gut. And scientifically, you call it intestinal permeability. But yet conventional medicine still doesn't think of it as a thing, like as if it doesn't even exist. How mind-blowing is that, And that goes, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say it's hilarious, because I had a podcast I was doing for a long time, or actually, so this was a year into my journey. I kind of started like documenting it and doing stuff on YouTube and stuff like that. I interviewed a gut like I don't know if the correct term is gut microbiologist, but she was also a professor, teaches nutrition, and she was a registered nutritionist and RD, but she specifically focused on gut microbiology and the gut and like gut health. And she straight up denied the existence of leaky gut to me. And she's in like the field researching it. And so that's when I knew like the world was broken.
Wow.
because I was talking to who was the mainstream, like credible expert, and literally saying, and I mean, I'll still see posts about it from RDs or people in like the mainstream scientific field that just deny its existence. And I just find it baffling. It's literally insane to me. So
Wow. When I started also sharing more posts on Carnivore as well, like the students that I went to the University of Miami, to do my PhD with, like my colleagues were in the same program, like they came out of the woodworks right away, and like I still remember how shocked I was. Like those are people who would come and hug me and be nice and friendly, and then they'd comment like publicly on my post, like, you should do better for your clients, chastising me for even like having the courage to say something different than the brainwashing that we were given. And those are people, mind you, that are struggling, with anxiety, body fat, like the whole thing, like the furthest thing from health and fitness. But yet they're telling me, that I'm wrong and that I should, in a way, should be ashamed of what I'm recommending. Another one, same thing, like a whole post, like took I don't know how long out of her day just to tell me how wrong I am, that a vegan diet can actually be healthy for you because red meat causes cancer. I'm like, where am I living? What is wrong with people? And those are PhD students.
yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, graduates, sorry, they had already graduated.
Yeah. No, I mean, I found that's like how, I mean, I think a lot of people kind of had a wake up to that this whole last year, just because healthcare has been on the mind of everybody. But I mean, it'll never happen, but I'd really be like going into like a petitionary state where we try and petition healthcare to relabel itself as sick care, because even the diseases they like high blood pressure and cholesterol and all these things that they would quote manage, I mean, you're not even eliminating the disease and creating health. You're just managing sickness. So it should just be called sick care, which is fine. Like, it's very accurate to what is done. I mean, I've never gone to the doctor. I mean, in recent past, I never look at doctors now as a way of mainstream, as a way of healing somebody. That's just not their job. Their job is to keep you alive with your problem on a manageable level and hopefully not kill you, basically.
Yeah.
And that's what they're taught to do. So it's kind of like, I mean, it's not even their fault. I mean, it's just their job.
Exactly. No, but I think it should be their responsibility. It should be their responsibility. After being in practice for 30 years and realizing your clients, your patients aren't getting better. No, I think we should start holding them accountable, because I don't know if you've had doctors also in your family, or doctors, and it's like, if you see the Journal of the American Medical Association, just pick one up, flip through it just for fun. It'll be an article about a condition, how to diagnose it, what is the medicine to give. On the back end of it is going to be the whole thing is going to be an ad for some new drug. You flip it again, another condition and what drug or combination of drugs to give it. You flip it again, more ads. Every other page is an ad for a drug, and then there always going to be one or two articles bashing functional medicine or treating the root cause. Anything having to do with the food or dietary supplements, they will always frame it as a fad or that doesn't work. And of course, because why are those organizations so powerful to begin with? Money. Where are they getting all of that funding from?
No, exactly. I mean, it's all money. I mean, my dad's worked in pharmaceuticals for like 30 years. That's his whole career. And like, we'll have discussions about this very thing. It's all money. I mean, it's business. Pharmaceuticals is ahead of everything else, a business, no matter what drug they're trying to get out there. And the doctors are sort of just the script experts. They just know how to write the scripts.
Exactly.
They're given the protocols from insurance. I mean, even hospitals. I mean, you go to hospitals and hospitals are told what drugs they're allowed to prescribe. And that's
especially
all
now with what's happening,
yeah.
you know? Yeah. Isn't that crazy? Shouldn't the doctor decide that for their patients?
Exactly. And I think, I mean, the story's shifted for me I mean, there was a period of time where I just hated doctors. I didn't think they had any benefit to anything. And now I have this huge, much wider view of, man, these poor doctors are just stuck too. You know, we're all just screwed, and it's terrible. And that's goes back to patient advocacy and it's like, how much are you willing to do for yourself? How badly do you want health? How much are you willing to put forward to figure things out? You know?
Yeah, it is one of the main challenges that humans are facing right now, their health, because the deck is stacked against you in this environment. And to your point, with doctors and with the medical system, the way it is set up, they're not being taught real health, right? They're being trained in pharmacology, not physiology. And that's why you see their programs lacking in things like nutrition. A lot of nutrition they shouldn't just be given the course that I'm teaching. They should be given a ton more, you know, but they don't give them any of that. They don't give them the exercise physiology, all those lifestyle things that are so crucial. But because if they were given that, then they'll realize that there is no need for everything else.
Yeah. And I think going back to mental health, I think the biggest issue with treating mental health is that we look at it only as being stuck between our ears, when it's really everything that's going on in here in your gut and the things you're putting in your mouth contributing to things in here. But it's not looked at it like that. And it's actually looked at, I mean, it is a little bit more now, I think, in general, as like a whole slowly getting there. But it's very much like, oh, you need to be in therapy. Like, and that's it. Like, that's the end. Or hey, you need to be on Lexapro or something, and that's the end.
It's true, so true.
And it's just really unfortunate, because I see people doing all the right things. They're going to therapy, they're seeing their psychiatrist, they're on this and that to manage this and that, but they're not being told like there's this whole other component that's affecting all of it, and like all of it, or creating it. And I think, and that's the missing link for that.
Therapy, what I think of that is like installing a new software, which is great, but you cannot install a new software on a broken hardware, right?
Oh yeah.
So if your computer is damaged, it's broken, you need to fix it first. You need to remove the fire that it has, whatever it's coming from, whether it's from diet, smoking, whatever it is. You remove the inflammation first, you fix it, and now that it works, now that you can actually load it, it turns on, then you go and you install the new software, then you go into therapy for sure. Like that can be helpful, but
totally.
No amount of talk therapy or techniques that you can learn, none of that can overcome just a dilapidated brain that literally cannot function.
Exactly. 100%.
Awesome. So I think this was very helpful for people, to learn about your story, from anorexia nervosa to the neuropathy, and how a carnivore animal-based diet has helped you. Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I just want people to know that there are action steps that they can take to better themselves that don't require spending tons of money or crazy amount of testing, which I've done on myself. And mostly I don't want anyone to think they need to rely on somebody else to take action for their own health. I think we sit around and wait, and really we could be doing things right now for ourselves on the very basic levels of just what we eat to benefit everything in our body and our minds.
So true. And where can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm most available at Ryan Mitchell Brown on Instagram. You can reach out to me, whatever, about coaching or just following my posts. And then I'm also Ryan Mitchell Brown on YouTube as well.
Oh, awesome. You know, I didn't know you had a YouTube channel. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's fun. It's a good time.
I'm going to check that out. Wonderful.
Sweet.
Thank you so much, Ryan. This has been a lot of fun. We should definitely do a round 2 soon.
Yes.
But that's it for me. I hope you have a wonderful day.